It is a great honor and pleasure for me to speak to you today and to report to you on an extensive survey of the attitudes, values, and beliefs of the Japanese people, with a special focus on the religious and spiritual beliefs and practices of the populace. Included in the study were surveys of young people, and we included these surveys because young people are the future, of course. Somebody said that young people in the world make up 40% of the world population, but 100% of the future. In looking at young people, we can look at emerging trends, and sometimes these trends serve as an early warning system, if you will. In my 50 years of polling, there's never been a study that I would consider more important than this one. First of all, because it gives us a rare insight into the current culture of the Japanese people, and for many people there are certain aspects of the culture that are still mysterious to people outside Japan, but also because the survey findings point to evangelistic strategies that can be undertaken. As a survey researcher, I am, of course, seek to be objective in question wording and all other aspects of survey research. As a Christian, I am keenly interested in the prospects of spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ in Japan. I believe the most important discovery that a person can make is the discovery that a person can have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And it is my constant hope and prayer that every person in the world will come not only to know about Jesus, but to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. I'd like to say it's been a great joy and a great blessing for me to work with people like Bill McKay and Tom Ivey, David Lewis, Grant McKay, Mark Joseph, and Matt Norquist on this important, groundbreaking study. These are men of great integrity and faith. Through them I have learned a great deal about the history of Japan and the changes that have come about in the Japanese culture since World War II. The findings from this extensive and in-depth study underscore the huge challenges found by those whose hearts desires to spread the gospel in Japan, and in this respect we can be profoundly grateful for the devotion, determination, and servanthood shown by the missionaries and pastors at this conference. The current study reveals enormous challenges and severe obstacles to the spreading of the gospel, but at the same time, certain shining opportunities. In my brief remarks today, I would like to discuss these challenges and opportunities as revealed by the findings of the study. I will be dealing with only certain broad trends, and in this respect I should note that we covered many topics, and there is a mass of data which can be explored to discover new insights. Sometimes the most important findings from the study come from examining subgroups within the population and looking at the differences between various regions in the nation. A strategic objective of the study was, as I indicated, to try to understand the current thinking of the Japanese people about themselves and the world about them, particularly towards spiritual issues that would provide a framework for drafting seeker-sensitive evangelistic strategies. By better understanding not only the attitudes of the Japanese people towards spiritual issues, and particularly toward Christianity and Jesus Christ, but also their interests and emotional desires, it is possible to fashion strategies that capitalize on these interests and concerns, and specifically in that regard I'll note 5 areas. First of all, to identify the truth that Jesus answers for the Japanese people. Secondly, to gain the attention and awareness and interest of the Japanese people regarding Christianity and Jesus Christ. 3, appeal to the perceived needs of the Japanese people, emotional, physical, and spiritual. 4, point the Japanese toward the gospel as the basis for dealing with all of life. And finally, equip Christian leaders and workers in Japan with ways to help them present the gospel effectively to the Japanese people. Before attempting to shed light on each of these areas, I'd like to note that despite the supposed inscrutability of the Japanese, survey respondents we found were fully open and honest and candid in their responses about themselves and their behavior. I believe it would be useful before discussing challenges and opportunities to look at the overall mood of the Japanese people at this time, more than a half century after World War II, as revealed in the study. The findings of the study show the populace is somewhat insular, uncomfortable with diversity and outsiders, and possibly in some small degree racist. In terms of reaching out to help others, the focus is primarily on one's own family or group and not on persons outside these groupings. Broader altruistic motives are not so apparent. Most Japanese, judging by their responses to scales on happiness, are neither very happy nor very unhappy. Their responses tend to fall between these two extremes. While at least moderately happy, many Japanese seem resigned to being caught up in the system or the cycle of life. There is a degree of fatalism in their somber mood. Teens' perspectives on life tend to a sense of nihilism to an alarming degree. A note of hopelessness is found in the responses to a number of questions. And there's little evidence of eternal hope, although a considerable number do believe in some form of afterlife. The shame factor appears to be a powerful factor in the ethics of the Japanese, perhaps at a time even pushing aside consideration of human kindness and the love ethic. Acceptance by one's peers is of paramount importance to the Japanese. Like much of the rest of the world, the Japanese tend to take a relativistic view on ethical matters. There is little belief in absolutes, and this is true across all generational groups. Shockingly, a certain proportion holds the view that murder is not always bad. In the hierarchy of crimes, that is, things that are wrong, those related to economic and family matters frequently outweigh those related to sexual activity. David Lewis, author and scholar and well-known expert on Japanese history and culture, points out that the Japanese tend to believe that misdeeds that are self-inflicted and hurt the self are not as bad as those that hurt the group. Well, this is a broad brush picture of the mood of the Japanese populace in the 21st century as a backdrop to the challenges and opportunities that present themselves in the efforts to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ in Japan. Perhaps the first and obvious challenge is overcoming the widespread lack of awareness and knowledge among the Japanese regarding Christianity and the teachings of Jesus Christ. 7 in 10 among adults and half of teens say they do not know enough about Christianity to express a favorable or unfavorable opinion about this religion. Correspondingly, 7 in 10 adults and half of teens say they do not know enough about the teachings of Jesus in order to give an evaluation. Clearly, all-out efforts should be made to increase the awareness and knowledge of Christianity and the teachings of Jesus Christ through schools as part of the study of world religions, television and radio, the internet, newspapers and magazines, churches, and other ways. Coupled with these efforts should be those that are directed toward casting Christianity and the teachings of Jesus in a favorable light. Among those who expressed an opinion on Christianity, favorable views outweigh unfavorable ones by a ratio of 3 to 1. That's among adults. Among teens, however, equal percentages say favorable and unfavorable. Turning to an evaluation of the teachings of Jesus, favorable opinion among adults outweighs unfavorable opinion by 2 to 1. Among teens, on the other hand, equal proportions say favorable and unfavorable. Well, these are worrisome findings, both in terms of the lack of knowledge of Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, but also in terms of unfavorable views, particularly among teens. It would be important to explore the reasons adults and teens view Christianity and the teachings of Jesus in an unfavorable light, perhaps through in-depth interviews. The current study, however, shows that most feel one can be Japanese and a Christian at the same time, so this does not appear to be a major factor in unfavorable attitudes, nor are negative views pronounced in terms of switching religions. The majority of the Japanese people claim to have no religion, but this rarely means that they do not have any religious beliefs or practices at all. Yet very few in the survey say the spiritual life compared to other aspects of life is extremely important. Far ahead of spiritual life in importance are family, friends, and education. Relatively few, in addition, place trust in religious leaders. In summary, then, we see challenges or obstacles to presenting the gospel in a number of ways. In the insular feelings and somber mood and feelings of hopelessness of the Japanese people, in the relatively little importance they give to religion compared to other aspects of life, yet at the same time their attraction to other religions, namely Buddhism and Shinto, and new religions, as well as their attraction to the paranormal. In their lack of awareness of Christianity and the teachings of Jesus Christ, coupled with a high level of unfavorable views about the same, particularly among young people. In some respects, there seems to be a solid, impenetrable wall that could prevent the spread of the gospel in Japan. Are there any possible openings in the wall? Let's look at the survey data in terms of possible opportunities for breaking down this wall of indifference and negativity. Certainly an all-out education effort through the media and the schools and in other ways could pay dividends. Let's look now at the bottom line question. How many Christians are there in Japan? 3 in 10 adults and 2 in 10 teens claim they have a religion. Of adults who have a religion, 3/4 are Buddhists. About 1 in 8 describes himself or herself as a Christian. Now let's look at teens. And here we find some stunning and encouraging news, particularly as we look to the immediate future. 2 in 10 Japanese teenagers claim they have a religion, and 1/3 of those who do so describe themselves as Christians, especially female teenagers. These proportions mean that 7% of the total teenage population of Japan boldly and forthrightly say they are Christians. This percentage projects to an impressive number of young new Christians excited and energized by their faith. Furthermore, despite the fairly high level of indifference to learning more about religion and specifically about Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, as many as 3 in 10 adults and a similar percentage of teens are interested in learning more about religion or are already doing so. How would these people want to learn more? Most say books and magazines, while others say in talking to friends, colleagues, or a parent, or give other responses. In seeking to reach people for Christ, the Christian message of hope and reassurance in times of darkness would likely be paramount, the survey clearly indicates. Also vital, of course, is the conviction that the teachings of religion are the truth. In this respect, evangelistic efforts should remind prospective converts of the discovery made by countless numbers of Christians over the ages that often faith comes before, not after, understanding, as well as the discovery that belonging comes before believing. Relationships should be developed prior to indoctrination. Gallup research shows that people with close friendships in their church are very satisfied with their congregation, less likely to leave their place of worship, and have a strong relationship with God. The current study will help those involved in evangelism target particular groups within the population, defined by age, education, sex, and many other characteristics. The sharing of stories and living the example of Jesus in government, in business, and in other major sectors of society can, of course, greatly stir hearts among the populace. In China, writes David Aikman, Christianity in the business community is often not discouraged by persons in authority because Christians are found to be honest and law-abiding. The challenge to those who seek to spread the gospel is not only to reach those who do not know Jesus Christ, but also to reach those presently within churches, to remind church members that it is incumbent upon them to share their faith, and to remind Christians of the need to harness the power of their God-given gifts in service to God's kingdom. Many Christians are unaware of God's plan for their lives. When people discover their gifts and talents and use these to serve God's purposes, there's no telling what God can accomplish through them. David Lewis wisely reminds us that evangelistic approaches to the Japanese should be those of accommodation rather than imposition, and that great sensitivity should be shown toward the spiritual perspective of the individual being approached. An evangelistic program that has proved to be highly effective is the Alpha Course, now operating in 150 nations of the world. Alpha has succeeded because it is responding to a deep hunger for God, coupled with a desire for deeper, more meaningful relationships with other people. Alpha is welcoming of all people, regardless of their spiritual or religious perspective, but at the same time is fully faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Promotion of Alpha or similar programs could bring people to Jesus Christ to a significant degree. It is estimated that 80% of those who take the Alpha course become believers. It is important, of course, that the faith of these new Christians be constantly nourished in small Bible study and prayer groups. It has been well said that faith grows best in the presence of faith. The focus of evangelistic efforts should be on young people. They are the future leaders and will set the moral tone and direction of the nation of Japan in the immediate years ahead. Young people in Japan are desperately in need of the healing hand of Jesus. Compared to their U.S. counterparts, Japanese teens are extremely bleak in their outlook on life. And let me give you some startling figures. 22% of U.S. teens, but 85% of Japanese teens say they often wonder why they exist. 76% of teens in the U.S. say they always see a reason for their being on Earth, but only 13% of Japanese teens say this. 76% of U.S. teens say they would choose the life the way it is right now, but only half, 48%, of their Japanese counterparts give this response. 12% of U.S. teens wish they were someone else, but 3 times as many, this percentage, 36% of the Japanese youth respond this way. And finally, 3% of U.S. teens would go so far as to say they wish they had never been born. But more than 3 times as many Japanese teens, 11%, give this startling response. Approaches should be made not only to teens, but to preteens. This younger group, in fact, is far more likely than their elders to have a sense of a personal God. And there is evidence in this survey to show that preteens may be more sensitive to an inner voice of conscience. Every effort possible should be made to help these preteens move into the teenage years with a strong sense of a personal God to whom they are accountable. The development of small Bible study and prayer groups among preteens as well as teens might prove fruitful. The challenges of bringing an ever-growing number of people to the point of conversion or transformation are huge, but not one could maintain insurmountable. In many nations of the world, there is a deep and growing desire for an experience of God. This may be true of the Japanese as well, who, while not religious, are sensitive to a spiritual dimension to life. And at a time of what appears to be a dark night of the soul for many Japanese, when they may have reached bottom in their psychological and emotional state, the people of this nation may be ready to receive the hope and reassurances that Jesus Christ brings. In considering evangelistic strategies, it is helpful to bear in mind that the spread of faith can happen in a geometrical fashion. If one Japanese person were to reach 2 other persons for Christ each year, and these 2 persons each reached 2 others every year, and so on, the entire nation of Japan could be evangelized within a generation. Today could be a historical moment of opportunity to seize the day and bring people of Japan to an ever-growing awareness of the life-changing and life-saving message of Jesus Christ. I hope and pray that your conference is enormously fruitful. Thank you for letting me be part of it.